Actually, Abir was 10 years old. She had no idea about the conflict, but she paid this price, her life, because only she's a Palestinian. As Robbie says, the most easy thing is revenge. But in fact, we decide, even in the combatants for peace, that we need to break this circle and stop revenge and stop support revenge by ourselves.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
لا نريدكم هنا.
לא רוצים אתכם פה.
لا نريدكم هنا.
لا نريدكم هنا.
لا نريدكم هنا.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
لا نريدكم هنا.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה. אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
لا نريدكم هنا.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
لا نريدكم هنا.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
لا نريدكم هنا.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
لا نريدكم هنا.
עופו מפה. אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
אנחנו לא רוצים אתכם פה.
Hi, good evening, everybody, or maybe it's morning or afternoon, I have no idea. But the video that you just saw was proof that people, even in the most difficult of times, can still find a trust in each other, that is Palestinian and Israeli, during the war in Gaza, came to Tel Aviv to express our love for each other and to try to prevent other people from experiencing this terrible pain of loss. My name is Robbie Damlin, and I joined the Parent Circle many years ago when the army came to tell me that my son David had been killed by a Palestinian sniper. One of the first things that I said, apparently, is you may not kill anybody in the name of my child. Now, I don't remember even saying this, but it was something very prophetic about what I would be doing with the rest of my life. I knew that I wanted to do something to prevent other families, both Israeli and Palestinian, from experiencing this pain of loss, but I didn't yet find a framework. And then a religious Jewish man came to see me. His name is Yitzhak Frankenthal, and said, I'm taking you to a weekend in East Jerusalem. And I remember going, and there were Palestinian and Israeli bereaved families there, and sitting around a table and looking into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers and realizing that we shared the same pain. And at the same time, also realizing that if we spoke in one voice to end this conflict, and if we could do that, surely, and we wanted reconciliation, this would be an example to the rest of the world. And so I started to travel all over, and I thought I was really very important. And I was in the House of Lords and in Congress and in hip hop concerts. And I just was very pleased with myself. And then one night when I'd come home, there was another knock on my door. And I went to the door and I opened it and I saw 3 soldiers. Now, when you see 3 soldiers, it can only mean one thing. And so I slammed the door in their face. I can't handle another child losing another child. And so they kept on knocking and knocking, and eventually I opened the door and they said, we've come to tell you that we caught the man who killed David. That was when it became difficult. You see, all of us, all over the world, can talk about love and peace and reconciliation and all these beautiful words, but do we actually mean it? This is the question that I was faced with this terrible dilemma. Now there was a person who was responsible for the death of David. It was no longer some illusion, some idea. what would I do? Would it be in integrity to continue this work? Or would I just leave it all because I couldn't face talking and walking the talk? And eventually, after 3 months, I wrote a letter to the family of the sniper, and I told them who David was. David was a student at Tel Aviv University, and he was studying for his master's in the philosophy of education. And he was part of the peace movement. And he, not only all of that, but he was a leader. And then he was called to go up to serve in the reserves. And I also said that we needed to meet because we owed that to our children and grandchildren. They were very shocked when 2 Palestinians from our group delivered this letter, as you can well imagine. They didn't expect to get a letter from the mother of someone their child had killed. And yet, I also had to tell them about the parent circle, that we are more than 600 families who've all lost an immediate family member to the conflict, and that we believe, and the vision of this organization is that if ever there is a political peace agreement, there has to be a framework for a reconciliation process within this peace agreement. Otherwise, at best, all we can expect is another ceasefire until the next time. I'm not a very patient character, and I imagined that I would get a letter immediately from the sniper, whose name is Thaya. Took me a long time to remember that name. And because his parents said they would deliver it to them. But then I began to learn that there's only one thing that you need to know. There's no such thing as instant reconciliation. Reconciliation is a process and it may never happen. And so this was something difficult for me because I really expected some kind of reaction from the man who killed David. I waited something like 3 years, and then I got a message, which was a kind of letter that came over the internet to tell me that I'm crazy and that I should stay away from his family and that he killed 10 people to free Palestine. But I knew that when he was a small child, he saw his uncle violently killed, and then by Israeli soldiers, and then in the second uprising, he lost 2 further uncles. And so I think he went on a path of revenge. He became a kind of a folk hero. He also said many things, and I understood then that actually I gave up being a victim. And if there's nothing that I can give you tonight, you have to understand that victimhood is what is so dangerous for moving on and for making a difference in this world. Then I went to South Africa to make a film called One Day After Peace, and to meet perpetrators and victims who had given evidence at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I also wanted to understand what the meaning of forgiving is. What is it? You know, and I met this extraordinary woman who'd lost her daughter. She was white and Afrikaans, and her daughter was killed by APLA, which was the African movement of, they were soldiers fighting for freedom. And I decided I wanted to meet her because she'd gone to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And she said to the people who killed her daughter, I forgive you. Now, what does that mean? I wanted to know what she meant when she said she forgave. Could I forgive? And so I went to visit her. And within this, I asked her, we were immediate sisters, of course, because all bereaved mothers become immediate sisters. And I said, June, tell me, what is your definition of forgiving? And she said, forgiving is giving up your just right to revenge. And then I met the man who actually sent the people to kill her, not her daughter specifically, but to kill. And he said, by her forgiving me, she released me from the prison of my inhumanity, which is the most extraordinary statement. And I came back to Israel with every intention then of meeting with Thaya, the sniper. But everything was in the way, but actually everything in the way was me. And so eventually I went to the Minister of Justice, who gave me permission to meet and to go into the jail. And then we were waiting for the police. And then what happened is we had elections. You may have all noticed that we tend to have rather a lot of elections in Israel. And of course, the new Minister of Just Us had no intention of allowing me to go into any kind of jail. And so what really, I think, I just decided that it didn't really matter. I had given up being a victim of the circumstance. It didn't really matter if I could do this now and make a completion, or maybe in a few years. I'm really apologizing for the strange noise. Somebody upstairs is drilling, which has never happened in all my 3 years, but I guess that's some kind of law, Murphy or something. So I'll try to talk over them. It is a bit disconcerting, I must say. I think that if everybody could really look into how they can make a difference, and if you'll notice behind me, there is a candle that I lit. This is a candle for all the thousands and thousands and thousands of families all over the world who've lost someone in the pandemic. Now, so many people never had an opportunity to say goodbye. And that is such a dreadful thing. There's no completion. What could they do? So maybe they can look at the work that people who have lost are doing to make a difference in the world. And maybe they can be inspired to take that grief that they feel and to harness it into making a difference in their own community. It doesn't mean you have to be involved with Israel and Palestine, not at all. There's so many things that you can do within your community that would give you a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And in the meantime, perhaps it might be a good idea to write a letter to the person you lost, because that is a way of gaining some solace of being able to say goodbye. It is dreadful, dreadful, and the whole world has to now understand that there will be such a reaction after Corona is over, of people who were left without any support, having lost family members, some of them stuck at home with nobody to talk to. And I think it's incumbent on all of us everywhere to take responsibility for these families and to perhaps go and show some kind of support. That doesn't mean you have to go and give advice and tell everybody what to do, and when they cry, arrive with tissues and water. That's not what's needed. What is needed is for you to be there, even if you don't feel very comfortable. You don't, just be there. Just see if there's anything you can do. Bring a cake, I don't know. Whatever it is that you can see is missing, just do that. I had so many wonderful friends who supported me and who came and just sat with me and didn't give me advice. And the ones who gave me advice are not really around so much anymore. I want to introduce you to somebody very special in my life. You know, people pass through your life. Sometimes there are ex-enemies who are now part of the work that you're doing for reconciliation and believe in the same cause. Some of them make you laugh. And laughing is a very big, big factor in this work, because if you can't laugh, you'll get burnt out. And some of them show love that you don't even get from your own family. And so some of them, my relationship is above the conflict. It's nothing to do with Palestinian and Israeli. It's to do with the humanity of the other. It's to do with trust. If you can build trust with your relationship with the so-called enemy, then you can create a little clip like you just saw in the beginning of this evening. The person I'm talking about is Bassam Aramin. I don't know how to describe to you how much I love this man. And so I really, and in the middle of Ramadan, and for anybody who's Muslim and is listening in, Ramadan Kareem. And Bassam, the floor is yours, my love.
Thank you, Robe. Thank you. Always you are inspiring me with your humanity and courage. I also share with you this feeling of trust and love above the conflict. So hi everyone. I'm happy to share with you my unlucky story, like as Robbie said, thousands and thousands around the world who live in conflict zones, who live in lack of freedom, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of thinking even. I spent 7 years in the Israeli jails when I was 17 years old. According to the human nature, according to Jabotinsky, he says oppression create resistance. When someone strange come to occupy you and to control your life, you find yourself as a fighter or a warrior, even if you don't want to. So I spent 7 years in jail, as I said, for resisting the occupation. I was part of 4 kids. We started at the age of 13 by raising the Palestinian flag. They find some old weapons with 2 grenades. They throw them to the Israeli soldiers. And of course, no one killed, no one injured because they don't know how to use it in a professional way. I learned in jail, if you know your enemy, you can defeat him or you can kill him. If you only hate him, you will kill yourself. So I start a process to know my enemy. So I start to study Hebrew, and in jail, I start to know who I am, who's the Palestinians. In fact, shortly, I watched a movie about the Holocaust by chance. And briefly, I want to enjoy seeing this movie as kind of revenge, to enjoy seeing someone torture those Jews, kill them, arrest them, occupy them, at least because I am in their jails. But after a few minutes, I found myself crying. I didn't expect to see such atrocities. It was too much for me. I don't believe that there are human beings can do the same to other human beings. Then I decide that I want to understand more about this Holocaust, which we consider it as Palestinians. I believe most of the Arabs and the Muslims that it's a big lie. And they create this lie just to justify their crimes or the occupation against us, against the Palestinians. So after so many years, in fact, in 2010, 2011, I make my master degree about the Holocaust in Bradford University in the UK. And as I said, it was like a tool for me to know your enemy or my enemy. Then, of course, you find yourself in a different place. And then you understand that if you know more, you act better. If you don't know, so you will remain as a victim to yourself, to your narrative, to your history. For that education, it's very important. Even if you want to fight, you need to know why you are fighting. Everything in jail push you to be more determined to continue your struggle, maybe armed struggle or violent struggle against your enemy, because there is no one to talk to. Their goal is to kill our humanity every moment. Our goal is to survive in order to continue our struggle. And this is our life in jail. I get released in 1992 after 7 years. Then 1 year later, we have Oslo Agreement for the first time between PLO and Israel. The first time we have hope that finally we have peace. In fact, you start to ask yourself questions. So why I spent 7 years in jail? Why all those victims from both sides pass away? Because we don't have peace agreement. So why our leadership cannot did such an agreement 20 years before? They will save thousands of lives. This is what I thought. And I start to be a peace activist when I discovered that more than 100 years we are trying to kill each other, to defeat each other, and the result until today, Israel is not safe and Palestine is not free, but more blood, more pain, more killing. In 2002, I hear in the Israeli media about something called refuseniks, which is ex-Israeli soldiers and officers who refuse to serve in the occupied territories or be part of the occupation. According to them, they want to live in a safe place, in a moral place. They don't want to be part of this illegal and immoral occupation. So I wish to meet those people. And 2005, we have the first meeting between 4 Palestinians, ex-prisoners. I was one of them, with 7 ex-Israeli officers and soldiers. So you can imagine this meeting between the real enemies. We know each other, we hate each other, and we did our best to kill each other physically from both sides. It was the most difficult meeting for each one of us. But we continue to meet every time for more than 1 year. We became 300 members. In the end of this year, we decide to create a movement. We call it Combatants for Peace. And our slogan was what Nelson Mandela says: if you want to make peace with your enemy, you need to work with your enemy. Then he became your partner. So we want to prove that we can be partners in both sides. 2 years later, in the 16th of January 2007, an Israeli border police shot and killed my 10-year-old daughter, Abir, in front of her school from a distance of 15 to 20 meters. In her head from the back, she fell down, and 2 days later, she passed away in Hadassah Hospital, where she born. It's the most difficult thing that could happen to anyone around the world. Especially Abir was 10 years old. She had no idea about the conflict, but she paid this price, her life, because only she's a Palestinian. As Robbie says, the most easy thing is revenge. But in fact, we decide, even in the Combatants for Peace, that we need to break this circle and stop revenge and stop support revenge by ourselves. So I said from the beginning, I wish Abir will be the last victim between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And I joined the parents' circle 2 days after I lost my daughter, because I know the parents' circle before. I know Robbie from the Palestinian media sometimes. So I know this noble organization, but in my worst dream, I don't want to join this organization because the price is unbearable. In fact, we are more than 620 families from both sides, Israelis and Palestinians, who decide to raise up our voice and to say no more killing. And I believe we have the moral authority to raise up our voice and to say that. Because simply, I said sometimes that we kill our kids with our own hands by encouraging them to take revenge. Revenge and victimhood mentality, it's the same, as Robbie says. Yes, I agree. When you release yourself from the victimhood mentality, you have no enemies and no one can occupy you. And this is the real peace. As Gandhi says, there is no way to peace. Peace is the way to live and to develop and to continue. So I decide to make the memory of Abir as a bridge between both sides, because revenge is the tool of the weak people. Maybe you solve your own problem by taking revenge, but I believe you will be a killer. You will create another victim in the other side, and you need to prepare the other victim from your side. This is about revenge in both sides. So we have a very simple message that we want to be partners. We don't need to fall in love with each other. We don't need to eat with each other. We can live in peace without even dancing together, as I said. but we need to trust each other and we need to respect each other. We have the right to exist, both sides. And we prove that through our activities together, through working together as enemies, we get to trust each other and we become friends, we become brothers, and we become families in many means. We kill each other for land. Land is very important. Jerusalem is a holy place for us, for the Muslims, for the Christians, for the Jews. But we kill each other for Jerusalem and meet each other under the ground of Jerusalem. And I am not sure if Jerusalem know who we are. We prove that when we talk to each other, no one will die. No one will harm the other. We can live, exist together, and there is no other way. I believe we need to share this Holy Land as one state or two states or 5 states. Otherwise, we will share the same land as 2 big graves to our kids, our families, our people. I don't believe that the Israelis will give up their safe place after 3,000 years of slavery and discrimination and anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. And I don't believe that the Palestinians, even after 3,000 years, will accept the Israeli occupation or the Israeli control. We must be free, like everyone around the world. So for that, as long as the occupation continue, unfortunately, we will continue to fight and to kill each other. The solution is to end this occupation and start to live together as human beings. This is the only way. And this is our message. This is the message of the Parent Circle and Combatants for Peace and every normal human being around the world. Thank you very much for listening. And it's the time to introduce to you our hero, our big friend, Sherry Orian, the Executive Director of the American Friends of the Parent Circle, who helped us over many years to do our job, to raise awareness, and to support our work on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bassam. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you for having us here today. I'm honored to be here representing the Parent Circle. Like Bassam said, my name is Shiri Orion. I'm the Executive Director of the American Friends of the Parent Circle. So it's my job to represent these wonderful people like Bassam and Robbie in the United States and all of the work that the Parent Circle does here in the US and to raise support for the important work that they're doing. And I can attest that Robbie and Bassam are truly very good friends and my very good friends as well. I've traveled with them all over the United States, and there is not one moment without laughter or something funny happening or a story being told. Their connection and their relationship really does transcend the conflict. There are hundreds of other members of the Parent Circle, like Robbie and Bassam, all of whom have lost someone to the conflict. And when we hear their powerful stories, and I've heard them countless times, I remind myself and I remind other people who are listening that as powerful as these stories are, there are hundreds and hundreds of other stories and dozens of other people who are working for the same mission, for the same cause, and who have paid the same price to be standing before audiences, not only in Israel and Palestine, but all over the world, sharing their stories of loss and their unique story of reconciliation. They could have chosen anything, but to choose reconciliation, to choose empathy, to choose understanding is a unique choice. And this takes courage. It takes deep reflection, and they have done that. The Parent Circle, while it's made up of members, bereaved members, both Israelis and Palestinians, the work on the ground that the organization does to promote reconciliation is mostly with non-bereaved Israelis and Palestinians, people who have not paid the highest price. In Israel, it's quite easy to not even really notice the conflict and to spend your day just having a normal day. And so when they go into high schools or they speak to different audiences about the work that they're doing, this really brings the tremendousness and the pain and the humanity of the conflict, the human cost of the conflict to people's hearts. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the important projects and work that the Parent Circle is doing, because it's not just bereaved people telling their stories. There's a lot more to it than that. We use the bereaved stories. They share their bereaved stories in order to generate inspiration. There is a joint staff of Israelis and Palestinians, so that's something that already makes us unique. It's very difficult to be a joint organization in the midst of a conflict between two enemies. There's about a 12-person staff. We have 2 offices, one in Israel and one in Palestine. There are 2 directors, one Israeli, one Palestinian. There are 2 directors of education, one Israeli and one Palestinian. Whenever we do any sort of activities, it's always with Israelis and Palestinians together. We have a joint board, an Israeli and Palestinian board working together. One year, the president is Israeli, and then the next year, the president is Palestinian. Now, these words are just coming out. You know, I say these words quite easily, but these are big deals. I mean, remember that there is an ongoing conflict. So for there to be a joint board and a joint staff that work together, this is a big deal. This is significant. This is not easy, but they are committed to doing this because they are modeling what they believe is possible for Israelis and Palestinians. And together for more than 25 years, the organization has been running education and public awareness projects. In education, we work with youth. People like Robbie and Bassam and other bereaved members go and speak to young people in high schools, in community centers, in homes, in people's houses. In Palestine, it's harder for us to speak. We can't speak in the schools, so we find other ways. We speak in a lot of people's homes and informal education groups. And for a lot of times, it's the first time that a Palestinian has met an Israeli in real life, or it's the first time that an Israeli has met a Palestinian as not seen as a terrorist on TV or a day laborer working on a project. And they can actually ask them questions, and they can see them as human beings. They can see them as people with children, as people with dreams, as people who get up in the morning and go to work, go to school just like they do. In addition, we run a project called the Parallel Narrative Project. This is a project we're very proud of. It's been going on for more than 10 years. There are more than 1,200 alumni that have gone through the project that are continuing to share our messages. What we do is we take a group of 30 people, Israelis and Palestinians, which again is not a simple task. You need to get permits to get Palestinians into Israel. You need to deal with Israeli fears of going into the West Bank. These are real obstacles. But we figured out a way to do it. And we take them on this journey of, it's a module, it's like workshops. And during the workshops, they learn about each other's narratives, about their historical narrative, about their national narrative, and about their personal narrative. We've taken groups to Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Remembrance Center in Israel, to see and understand the Israeli psyche, the terrible atrocity that happened to the Jews, the reason for the establishment of the State of Israel, so that people understand, so that the Palestinians understand where the Israelis are coming from, their most recent history. And then we take the group to a town called Lifta, which is a former Palestinian village, which the Palestinians were forced to flee and evacuate in 1948 in the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe. And the village was decimated, but there are still remains. And we go there so people, the Israelis will understand the Palestinian psyche of the Nakba and the loss that they feel and the connection that they feel to the land. We don't do this to compare suffering or compare narratives, but to create understanding. And our programs work. We evaluate them, they work, they are effective. We have a summer camp for young people. I hope we can do it this summer. Last summer, because of Corona, we couldn't do it, and our youth were very disappointed. But this summer, we're planning on doing it, and they look forward to it every year. I want to tell you about one last project and then show you a video about it. It's our women's group. We have a very strong women's group, all bereaved women, Israelis and Palestinians, who have decided to take a more active role in peace building. And so in order to do that, first they needed to strengthen their bonds with each other, their relationships and connections and understanding with each other. And they also needed to do a lot of learning about conflict resolution, about women's roles in peace building. And they do a lot of work together. Their most recent project that they did together was in honor of International Women's Day on March 8th. What they did is they collected flowers and they pressed them and they created a book of beautiful flowers. And I'll show you in a minute a video and the book, the final product. It's called Flowers of Hope. So I'm going to take you to the video. I'm going to have to share my screen. So I hope I'm allowed to do that. I have the ability to do that.
Logan, do we have the video?
I have the video.
I think because we were preloading them so we don't have a lag. We have it preloaded, right, Logan? We have it already.
Okay, go for it.
All right.
الوردة هذه قطفتها عشان إهداء مني لروح ابني.
Dear Madam Vice President, the bereaved Palestinian and Israeli women members of the Parent Circle Families Forum find that International Women's Day is an ideal day to congratulate and to honor you. We would like to share with you a gift and commemorates the loss of our 24 children, sisters, brothers, and parents.
بيوم عيشة شلا بينه وأمي صالح نهراج. مאז שהוא נהרג, אני לא חוגגת את יום האישה.
أنا اليوم قطفت هاي الوردة من هون لأنه ما قدرت أقطفها من عند قبر ابني لأنه كتير صعب أشيل إشي من عند قبره.
وحابة أهديها كمان لكل أم ثكلى فقدت ابنها. אני כתבתי את הברכים מהאנדרטה של הילדים, וזה הלבן, זה הלב שלהם, הלבן, שהם לא עשו כלום בחיים שלהם.
أنا ليلى الشيخ من بتير بيت لحم. أنا أم الشهيد قصي وعضوة في منتدى العائلات الثكلى.
أنا منى أبو سارة من القدس، أم للشهيد خالد أبو سارة.
הדרך שאני בחרתי זה אמנון ותמר, שכתבתי מהקבר של אבא שלי. זה מתחבר גם לתאומים שלי שיש לי, הלל ותמר. ובשבילם בעצם אני עושה את כל העשייה הזאת, את כל הפעולה הזאת. לתת להם איזושהי תקווה במקום הזה. אמנם יש כאן 24, 12 ישראליות ו12 פלסטיניות, אבל אנחנו מדברות בשם ארגון שלם.
أنا اليوم عضوة في منتدى العائلات الثكلى الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي. حابة كمان هذه الوردة تكون رسالة، إنه هذه رسالة سلام ورسالة أمل لحد ما إنه نوقف الألم، نوقف الثكل.
Great. Thank you. So you see that the book that we made at the Bereaved Women Aid was for the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris in honor of Women's Day, and we will hand deliver this book to her just as soon as we can get on a plane safely and do that. I wanted to read a few quotes to you from the book. We have them prepared. I don't know if I can share my screen or not, or you guys need to do that.
Nope, you got it.
I can. Okay, so hold on. sorry. I just wanted to go, there we go. Okay. The book starts like this. We would rather give you a flower than put one on a new grave. This quote is from Aisha Faris. She's from Nablus. She's Palestinian. She lost her brother Ali. She writes, "Great hope creates great people, and it is that small window, no matter how small, that opens wide horizons in life." Miri from Israel lost her brother Amnon. She writes, "Where flowers bloom, so does hope." One can live without seeing, but one cannot live without hope. I face life's difficulties with hope for a better tomorrow. That's from Bushra. Bushra is from Beit Omar. She's Palestinian. She lost her son, Mahmoud. Every day I learn that empathy means really listening, even if you don't agree. This is from Robbie, who you heard from before. She lives in Jaffa. She lost her son, David. Hope for the soul is like a raindrop on an arid desert. Laila al-Sheikh, she was in the video too. She lost her son, Kusai. I want to let my twins grow and flourish in a place where there is hope. Mital Ofer, also Israeli, she lost her father. And these are some photos of the women putting together the book. So I think I'm going to now turn it back to Robbie, who wants to tell you a little bit more about some of the work that we hope to do. Before I leave, though, if I may, I want to put a link in the chat that to our website that will allow you to get more information about the work we're doing. Okay, I'm getting a green light, so I'm going to do that. So it's parentscirclefriends.org. Thank you very much. Robbie, unmute yourself.
It's very difficult to unmute me.
It's difficult to mute you.
So, you know, I've been working on the ground for many, many years, and I think about the Parent Circle and how much work we've actually done and how much transformation has happened through the work that we've done. And there are so many extraordinary people, as Shiri was starting to tell you, that actually are part of the Parent Circle and were the originators. Some of them are in their 80s already. And so I've been dreaming about doing a project of testimonials. I think it is so important for us to be able to take these stories and use them all over the world as some kind of inspiration for to show that it's possible to change. Because of course, if we don't think you can change, there's not much point in doing the work that we do. I mean, I'll give you a little story behind. As you may have noticed, I like to tell stories. We had this extraordinary, how can I tell it? How shall I tell you this? We had it as a weekend of Palestinian and Israelis, and a young soldier came to talk about what he had done in the army. And one of the things that he admitted was that he had killed a young Palestinian in Gaza. Now you can imagine the reaction of the women there. And eventually he spoke and showed so much sadness and so much remorse that one of the Palestinian mothers came and she put her arm around him and she said, you are my son now. Now, this may sound very trite to you, but that is an extraordinary expression of being able to understand the humanity in the other. These are just small things that have happened over all of these years. The person who actually created this organization and his vision and how he saw it in the beginning and how he went with Yitzhak Rabin to Oslo when he got the Nobel Prize, and how he was ostracized by his own community because he was religious who wouldn't pray with him when he had to pray for his son because they didn't agree with the fact that he wanted to take his tragedy when his son was captured and killed by the Hamas and to turn it into something that would make a difference and create peace. And so it's like there are so many of these stories, hundreds and hundreds of these stories. And I thought, we cannot allow them to go to waste. You know, I know when you go to the Holocaust Museum, you watch these short, I presume it's in all the others, but certainly in Jerusalem, you watch these short videos, which are a testimonial. And these are testimonials which will live forever. And I think that every university that has a conflict resolution department can use these stories as a kind of how can I even put it, as some kind of way of showing students that things can happen, that people can change, that people can go through transformation. I'll tell you a very short story about Bushra. She was one of the women in the book that you just saw, and I'm hoping that we will manage to give it in person to Kamala Harris because she's an extraordinary woman, and we did this with so much love. And then, of course, with the corona, we can't get it to her, and we don't want it to sit on somebody's desk. We want to give it to her in person. There are so many stories. So Bushra lives in the West Bank in a town called Bet Umar, and she lost her son. And I went to a meeting in the West Bank to talk to Palestinian women. I was the only Israeli there. And when she walked into the room, she had this big picture of her son around her neck. And she looked at me and she recognized that I was Israeli and she wanted to leave immediately. And I caught her at the door and I said, please stay. I want to know what happened to your son. And she sat down next to me with her back more or less to me. And she started to tell me the story of her son. And I asked her what happened to him and how did he die and how old was he and what was he studying and everything that brought him to life, more or less, through Bushra's eyes. And then I said, would you like to see a picture of David? David was my son who was killed. And she said very reluctantly, okay. And then she turned towards me and she looked, I took a picture of David in my hand and she said, haram, which means what a pity. That was an emotional breakthrough for her. Today, she's one of the most important women in the parent circle. She does dialogue meetings. She runs a parallel narrative that Sherry told you about. She traveled all over the world with me and all of her family are in the parent circle now. And I could see her complete transformation. We were in Toronto at Women in the World, and she made a joke on the stage. And I knew then that she'd gone through this amazing transformation. And I love her the same way as I love Bassam. And her children are like, they think I'm their granny, which is really nice. Maybe that's because I always bring sweets. So I'm thinking to myself, all of these stories can't get lost. We have to find a way to do these testimonials. So I'm making this pitch to all of you guys, anybody who wants to support us to create this program, which is so important for everybody in the world. I can only tell you that mothers from all over that I've met are so amazing and there's no need to build this bridge, but if they could learn to tell their stories and be inspired by the way that we do it, then that would be amazing. I watched the Democratic Convention when Hillary Clinton was running to be the president. And there were Black mothers on the stage. And the Black mothers were tremendously moving. And then 3 days later were the mothers of the police officers who'd been killed. And I thought to myself, wow, if they stood on the stage together and said, stop the violence, wouldn't that be so much more effective in the way that we do in the parent circle with the Palestinian and Israeli speaking in the same voice? And then I traveled to the States and met some of them. And one of them is a congresswoman now, Lucia McBath. And I was so amazed by these extraordinary women who inspired me. And we spoke at the Martin Luther King Museum together with mothers of police officers. So you see, the message that we bring is not a local message. This is an international message which everybody can share in and everybody can be a part of, and everybody can use the methods and the work that we do to transfer it to their own countries. There's so much polarization all over the world. Surely it's time for us, and especially with all the trauma that's going to be now after Corona, it's our duty, all of us, to try to make a difference. And the way that we think now, well, maybe this is my swan song because I'm an endangered species, but I think it would be so incredible to be able to do the testimonials. So anybody who has any ideas, you had our address in the chat. I would be so delighted if you could. Where is Shiri? Can she come back? Have we lost her? Shiri, do you want to say anything more about it?
I mean, I think that this is a critical project. I mean, when I think about this project, I think about the testimonials at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Remembrance Center in Jerusalem. And whenever I go through there, what really sticks with me, what really resonates with me is just standing and watching and listening to the stories of the survivors. To me, there's nothing more powerful than that. And I think that our stories, yours and Bassam's stories, and all the other member stories, you talk about the power of your pain. And that really is true for these testimonials. We must be able to collect and document them and be able to share them with the entire world. And I think that this project is a great way for us to be able to do that.
So I have no idea how much more time we have if we do, because I can go on talking ad nauseum. David, tell us how long we have, and if we don't have much time, then we'd be very happy to put this beautiful song that Achinoam Nini created for the Parents Circle. And we had to get up very early in the morning to go to the border of Egypt to make this wonderful clip. And just to say thank you so much, David and Kyle, for everything you do and for creating this extraordinary experience and allowing us into this world of yours. I have to say that Together We Remember has become a very dear part in my heart now. And thank you so much. So we say goodbye with this beautiful song.
Beautiful. We will do so. We have we're 3 minutes early, so I wanted to just chime in for a few moments before we end with the song on the exact note that you'd like to end on, and just say thank you so much. We only met just a couple months ago, and here we are on a global virtual event for like the third time, I think, and it's just been so beautiful to collaborate. And I've known of the Parent Circle for a good bit of time, and I have to tell you, at the very first Together We Remember vigil, I told you this when we first met, one of the first questions I got when we were reading names of the victims of different genocides was, well, what about the Palestinians? Or what about the Israelis? And then I knew right away, regardless of what my position was, that I needed to have an answer. And it just, you're automatically like receiving that weight of history. And, a 20-year-old college student, I didn't feel adequately prepared to provide an answer. And then even when you do provide an answer, you're going to piss off everyone anyways. It's just, and these are folks that I'm supposed to look up to and respect. And as a young progressive Jewish, person, it's just, you feel like you can't win. Like this is the issue on domestic issues in the United States, on anything. It's the thing that gets in the way. So for example, if, there are organizations that I know in certain towns that they will not show up together, Israel, Jewish and Muslim organizations. But if there were to be a mass shooting at a mosque or a synagogue, they would show up and stand arm in arm. So my question is, why can't we do that before the mass shooting? What would it take, right? And I really have very little patience for that, because my question is, what are we willing to do to prevent more names from being added to lists, whether it's in Israel or Palestine or in our communities? And I feel like the work, as Robbie and Shiri, you talked about, and Bassam as well, you're doing it, right? If you can find a way to stand on the same stage, then why shouldn't the rest of us? And that to me
I think one of the things that I wanted to say very much was that please don't take sides. Don't be pro-Israel, don't be pro-Palestine, because what you do with that is you import our conflict into your country and create hatred between Muslims and Jews. That doesn't mean you mustn't be involved with trying to promote peace, but don't be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution.
Thank you for that. And the other sentiment that I wanted to sort of share and just ask about for a moment is, you know, where do you find the most resistance? Because I feel like I have encountered more resistance from my own community on this subject matter than in engaging with other communities. And I'm sort of curious, what's the, you know, even just saying the name of some organizations, like when I share the name of your organization, some circles are like, well, they partner with this organization, which partners with this organization, so then we can't show up in the same space. And like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to call bullshit on that. Like, if that's the game we're playing, we're going to lose. So, you know, I wanted to ask you about that because we don't have time to mess around.
But, you know, we have that all the time. And so, like, one of the things that I would do is we just had the ceremony on Memorial Day. And we have a joint ceremony of Palestinians and Israelis because the tears are the same color and what falls into the grave are the same color. And so you say to them, watch the ceremony. We had 250,000 people watch the ceremony this year. I mean, that is incredible. And that's a way of reacting to it. Or tell them about the people that you've met from the parent circle and let them go into the website and see for themselves. They can't, even the hardest of hearts, David, would be moved, I think.
No. Well, that's why we're going to continue to hopefully work together. We are going to support you in this work of gathering the testimonies. We just had Father Patrick Dubois from Yahad and Unum, and they're gathering thousands of testimonies in Guatemala, in Iraq, in Eastern Europe. We know the USC Shoah Foundation, so there are great opportunities to connect the dots and see, you know, what best practices are there and to find support.
Thank you.
And I'm seeing in the chat, folks are saying, yes, we're talking about things that we need to be talking about. So anyways, I will welcome Logan now to share our concluding video. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Shiri. And thank you to Bassam.
Thank you all.
As well.
Thank
and
you.
We'll be in touch soon.
Look at me across the border, beyond the wall. Look at me the way you would observe yourself in life's broken mirror. No, I refuse to bow to those who say the world is changing now, and as it changes there's no way to see the other like a child lost in the loneliest night. Those who'd sentence us to fear and fight. Her child will soon be born, but who knows if he'll find favor in the eyes of those who rule and rampage, who dominate the earth and skies. With words of hate, they close the gates of hope. Cannot let them blind us, for every woman in the world knows what it's like when they cripple and bind us. Forever searching and waiting and anticipating, we ask ourselves when, we ask again and again, when will we finally find freedom? Look, there is a crack and it's growing. There is a light and it's glowing through the sorrow beyond the tears, beyond tomorrow. There must be something more that we can do. I can see you, your beauty shows. Beyond your weakness and pain, it glows. The morning is near now. As the stars disappear, we'll shatter that wall. We'll watch it fall. Together, sister, we can come.